We're getting some very interesting rumors out of Cleveland in terms of what the future of their team is going to look like, and more specifically, Donovan Mitchell's future as a Cleveland Cavalier, which is crazy to say because just a year ago, they spent a ton to bring this guy in, to add him to Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and it felt like, at least to me, partway through the year last year as well as last offseason, Cleveland was a team on the rise. Cleveland was a team that you were going to have to deal with as you went through the Eastern Conference, and I really liked their construction despite the fact that they had some obvious holes, and they spent this offseason trying to address some of those needs, bringing in some guys on the wing. But the future of Donovan Mitchell as a Cleveland Cavalier, based off these rumors, is definitely in question. Really quickly, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant.org. Now, I go through a lot of numbers for these videos, stats, contract numbers, free agency stuff, and it's really taken me years to fully understand how all of those things interact. And it's a skill that I need, and it's a skill that I wish I had a service like Brilliant to help teach me earlier. And for you personally, whether it's work or you're just curious about learning new things, Brilliant is here to help you reach your goals. That's why they exist. From simple to advanced, science to data analysis, they want to help you understand these concepts in the most efficient and effective way possible. And the most important part of all this is being efficient with your time. I'm sure a lot of you can relate that there's just not a lot of time in the day to learn new skills and concepts fully, and that's the whole reason that Brilliant exists. Their interactive learning techniques are designed to help you build your knowledge base in a practical way without taking a ton of time out of your busy schedule. And you aren't just memorizing facts or figures, you're actually thinking through and understanding each concept thoroughly. Now, for me, as I mentioned earlier, that concept is going to be data analysis, understanding numbers, really thinking through what those figures mean. But for you, it could be any number of courses that they offer. And to try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/sporting or click the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. I hope you guys enjoy Brilliant, and thank you again to Brilliant.org for sponsoring this video. And this was always going to be a risk for Cleveland when they decided to bring in Donovan Mitchell in the first place. It's part of the reason why, for some people, Cleveland didn't have to give up as much as maybe they should have to get a player of Donovan Mitchell's caliber, because you didn't know if he was going to want to stay with the Cavs long term. He's always been someone that has had rumors and reports about him having his eye on playing elsewhere, playing in some of these bigger markets, and the Cavs are a good team and they're a good franchise, but what we've learned over the last decade in the NBA is you always have to be concerned as a quote-unquote smaller market team about guys wanting to be elsewhere. You can have some success, you can put good pieces around those players, but they still can look at other opportunities. And the reason that that's important for Mitchell specifically is because he's a 2025 free agent, which right now might feel like a really long ways away, but a year from right now, Donovan Mitchell is going to be on an expiring contract. And I, as we're going to talk about later, don't anticipate him signing an extension with Cleveland, which puts them in a really tough spot. Because I do think that their roster is good overall. I like some of the moves that they've made this offseason. They really did just need one other guy that they could put out there on the wing and could add some lineup versatility. And in theory, one more year with all these guys together to continue to grow and get better together, in addition to the fact that so many of their key players are so young, that they should be better this year. But the main reason that this is an issue in the first place is because the Cavs did all this stuff, right? Like they spent years getting Mobley and Jared Allen, Darius Garland, they get Donovan Mitchell on a trade last year, and then they win one playoff game. And they didn't look very good doing it against a Knicks team that was good, but with the talent that Cleveland had on their roster, they should have won more than one playoff game. And anytime that happens, even if you have a good roster, anytime you disappoint in the postseason and you have a star that could potentially leave, it puts more and more pressure on you. And for Mitchell specifically, his free agency situation is something that we're going to have to continue to monitor, because I don't think there's really any scenario in which he signs an extension with Cleveland, certainly this offseason, but even next offseason as well. All the way in 2025, he has a player option in that offseason, and the cap, as we've seen with some of these more recent player contracts, is only going to continue to rise. And so there really is no reason for Mitchell to sign his extension now while they are still waiting on the cap to go up. There's going to be a new TV rights deal going into effect, and if he goes into 2025 as a free agent, he will maximize his earning potential on his next contract and earn himself over $60 million a year potentially on a new contract. And that is something that it just doesn't make any sense for him to sign the extension now when that is on the table. And again, this is a risk that Cleveland was aware of when they brought in Donovan Mitchell in the first place, but I'm sure they had anticipated that they were going to be more successful in their first year with Donovan Mitchell, and hopefully more successful over this next year and maybe the year after as well, if Mitchell is still there, to try and convince him to stay. Because the only thing that you can do if you're Cleveland, you can't become a bigger market overnight. You can't provide those kinds of outside of basketball opportunities overnight. But what you can do is have real legitimate postseason success. That's the best way you can convince Mitchell to leave, because if 2025 comes around and Donovan Mitchell still is, winning one, maybe two playoff series in that time frame, he's going to be looking at other options. He's going to be looking at a team like the New York Knicks that were in on him in the first place and nearly traded for him the offseason that Cleveland did. He's going to be looking at all of these bigger market opportunities, and he's going to have this huge contract on the table from a lot of different teams. Donovan Mitchell is still young enough, and he's the kind of player that teams will plan for. They will prepare to have cap space. They will prepare to have assets to trade if need be, if it means that they can bring in Donovan Mitchell, and that's something that Cleveland has to constantly be aware of. But that's not the only way that this could go poorly for them. If partway through this season, or once the season is over going into next offseason, it's realistic to expect that Donovan Mitchell could request a trade as well. It's not uncommon for guys to request a trade now with multiple years left on their deal, whether that be in the middle of the year this year, or use their leverage as an expiring contract, the way Mitchell will be next year, to try and force their way to a particular team and then sign the big extension with bird rights to get even more money and end up on the team that they wanted to in the first place. And I'm not saying by any means that Cleveland is going to be bad this year or that this is an imminent situation that's going to happen tomorrow. But what I am saying is there is a path where Cleveland is not that great this year. Maybe they have some injuries, and Cleveland explores the possibility of trading Donovan Mitchell at the trade deadline this year because they're anticipating him leaving in 2025 free agency. That same scenario exists possibly in the offseason of 2024. If their season doesn't go well, maybe they don't win a playoff series again and he's looking at other options, or at the trade deadline in 2025 as well. At any of those key points, we've made it through this offseason, but at any of those key points, trade deadline this year, next year's offseason, and next year's trade deadline, Donovan Mitchell could be on his way out of Cleveland. And again, the only way to counter all of that, the only way to prevent all of that, if you're Cleveland, is to have a better year this year. And I think that's why we saw them make as many moves as they did this offseason to try and add wings, to try and add versatility to their lineup, because they know how much is on the line for them this season. Now, the nice thing about this for Cleveland is even if Donovan Mitchell does end up leaving or you have to trade him, it's not like they're one of these teams that have pushed all their chips into the middle with some of these older aging players and then they lose their best guy. They do still have a really, really nice young core of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and Darius Garland, in addition to some other, perimeter players on the roster. They do still have some pieces. If they were to trade away Mitchell, whether it be at the deadline, the offseason, or next year's deadline, they would recoup a lot of, if not all of, what they traded for Mitchell in the first place. And then they're still going to be able to be a competitive team. They're not going to be at the bottom of the league. They'll still likely be a postseason team. But the whole point of the Mitchell trade was to push them to something higher than that. And it was to put them in a category of team that they weren't in that moment. Prior to trading for Mitchell, they were an interesting team. They were an up-and-coming team. They were a play-in team, but they never had a real legitimate chance of making the conference finals or even representing the Eastern Conference in the finals. And the Mitchell trade was step one of trying to make that happen. And I'd have to assume that Cavs fans thought that that window would last longer than 2 seasons when they traded for Donovan Mitchell. And I'm here to tell you, it might not. It might not even last 2 full seasons. Donovan Mitchell could very easily, a year from now, a year and a half from now, be on a completely different team. That's the reality of how things are in the NBA now, where guys can jump from team to team. They have the opportunity to request a trade at any moment. And all of that comes down to the amount of, or lack thereof, team success that you have. And all this can be changed for Cleveland if they make the conference finals and they make the finals this year. But the moment that they lost in 5 games to the Knicks in the first round after trading away multiple firsts and a player in Lowry Market that ends up becoming an all-NBA caliber guy with Utah, the moment they traded away all those things to win 1 playoff game, all the pressure got put on them. And this season means everything for them. I'm going to continue to keep an eye on all year long at the trade deadline. Possible rumors about Mitchell. Maybe he would consider signing an extension possibly if they were, really, really good this year. There's going to be teams circling, seeing Donovan Mitchell as their future of their franchise moving forward if they can get him either in a trade and get him to sign a new contract in 2025 or just sign him as a free agent in 2025. And you have to continue to keep an eye on that and be mindful of that if you're the front office in Cleveland.